Hi, welcome to Introduction to Art of the Andes. Today's lecture will be a pretty brief one. I'll be just explaining some of the chronology we're going to be using for this class, some of the different regions that we'll be looking at, and some of the concepts that are going to help you understand the art that we will be looking at in the coming weeks, and help you hopefully place it in the cultural context. So we'll start out by looking at geography, speak a little bit about chronology, and then talk a bit about the aesthetic styles and some of the concepts behind them. So although there are many different varied and very interesting cultures throughout the very large continent of South America, this class will be focusing on art of the Andean region. Most of what we'll be looking at in this class will be located in modern-day Peru and modern-day Bolivia. So these regions right in here, just to get you kind of acclimated where we're going to be looking at. So the regions we'll be focusing on are going to be the Andes Mountains, coastal Peru, again, modern-day Peru and Bolivia. So the term the Andes can refer to either the mountain range that stretches along the west coast of South America, but it also is used to refer to a broader geographic area. This includes the coastal deserts just to the west of the mountains, and also the tropical jungles just east of the Andes Mountains. And this region is home to a distinct cultural area. We have strong cultural continuity that dates from around the 4th millennium BCE all the way to the time of the Spanish conquest. And many of these cultures, continued on in their traditional ways even after Spanish contact, but this class mainly focuses on art up until that time, although it is always important to remember that many of these indigenous cultures are still very much alive even into the modern day, despite some, influences from the West and, modern culture as well. So from the desert to the coast, these mountains actually rise up fairly quickly within like around 50 miles of the Pacific Ocean. So it's very abrupt. So the people who lived in the Andes had to adapt to a lot of different, very quickly changing temperatures, different climate zones, and different ecosystems, all within a fairly small area. So this very diverse environment is going to give rise to a range of architectural and artistic practices, mainly having to do with the availability of different materials and the goals and some of the different challenges that those environments provide. So just so you know, the Andes Mountains is home to the tallest mountain in the New World. Mount Aconcagua is a mountain in the western Mendoza province in Argentina, right along the border between Argentina and Chile, and it's the highest point in the Western Hemisphere. So let's first talk about northern, central, and southern Andes. This is a place of environmental extremes. Western South America along this mountain range contains both the world's driest desert, the world's longest and second highest mountain chain, second only to the Himalaya, and over 1 billion acres of rainforest in the Amazon. So there's quite a bit of ecological diversity in this region. So because we have these different regions where people are living and building civilizations, by the way, when I say civilizations, I'm just meaning cultures that live in cities. So cultures and civilizations living in these areas really depended on trade and reciprocity with other regions because many of these different ecological zones that people are living in are abundant in some resources and totally deprived of other resources. So for example, folks living along the coast had access to a lot of marine life, seafood options, but they might not have had access to things like llamas that were, used by people in the higher altitude regions. Some regions had precious metals like gold that they would trade for, other food and resources. Some folks along the coast could grow cotton in their fairly dry environments that were watered by glacial fed rivers. Folks living in the Amazon had access to, luxury trade goods like feathers that were very highly prized for luxury goods, and other plants and animals from the jungle. So this is going to kind of shape these different cultural entities, but also push them towards trading and interacting with each other. So coastal Peru is a really interesting place because it is extremely, extremely dry in this desert region. So basically what happens in South America is a lot of moisture comes in from the Atlantic Ocean. It hits the Andes mountain range, and then all the rain comes back and dumps on the Amazon rainforest. And then it creates this rain shadow. And then to the west of the Andes Mountains, there's like almost no precipitation. It's extremely dry air. So the only way that people living in the coastal desert are getting water is because there's a lot of glaciation up in the Andes Mountains, and there's a lot of snow melt that will eventually and consistently melt and provide them with water through rivers. But some of these areas of coastal desert have actually never recorded a single drop of rain. It's just incredibly dry. The Humboldt Current is a current that goes along the west coast of the Americas. We get it along the Pacific coast here in California as well. It's one of the reasons why our ocean is so much colder than the Atlantic. The Humboldt Current takes really cold, nutrient-dense waters from up in Alaska, and it brings it down this channel along the west coast of the United States, and South America as well. The Pacific Ocean is pretty deep here, and that cold, nutrient-dense water is home just teeming with abundance in sea life. This includes whales, dolphins, fish of all sorts, and just many things that people can use, sea lions, many animals that people can use for sustenance. Also along the coastline, people are going to be trading for things like spondylus shells and other types of non-food materials that can be harvested from the ocean. So seafood and shells were things, conch shells, spondylus shells were things that folks along the coast could trade with people in the highlands. They could also grow cotton there. So textile weaving is a huge part of Andean culture. People have been developing extremely highly technological techniques for creating fabrics long before they started creating ceramics and other technologies like that. So textile weaving will be a very prime source of the art material we'll be looking at for this class. So the cotton was grown here on the coast, which could be used to create these just incredible textiles. And the extreme dry environment from an archaeological perspective is actually quite a blessing, because this extremely dry environment preserves very fragile materials like organic materials that would otherwise in warmer climates just totally rot on us. So we have examples of pieces of fabric, preserved human bodies, like leather goods, things from that have been preserved for thousands of years because of that dry climate totally desiccating and preventing the normal breakdown of organic material. Another really awesome fact about all of this super well preserved organic material is that it can be radiocarbon dated. So radiocarbon dating only works with organic materials, so materials that were once alive. Scientists can measure the breakdown of carbon in those materials. I believe we talked about this in the introductory lecture to art history, but yeah, that's really amazing for our archaeologists to have access to those materials. However, coastal Peru is an area that is very prone to destruction with El Nino Southern Oscillation weather events. So the desert coast is segmented by about 30 east-west rivers from glacial sources in the mountains. Here, goods like beans, peppers, and maize can be grown for food. And then the El Nino years bring warm water, which leads to a lot of die-offs of fish and marine animals. This can also create catastrophic flooding on the coast as well. So again, in normal years, the coast is very, very dry. The rivers run to the coast. They're fed by the snow melt from the Andes Mountains. And this is really interesting because it allows people to farm in an area that is definitely an abject desert. And people also would learn how to create canals for irrigation there along the coast. So highland Peru is up in the Andes Mountains. Again, Mount Aconcagua is the highest peak outside of Asia. It's this hugely long mountain chain. And up here at these very, very high elevations, the use of alpacas and llamas were very, very important. People could use these animals for their milk, they could use them for meat. But when you're living in these really extreme mountainous conditions, the weather can change, can have changes of about 50 degrees from daytime to nighttime in Fahrenheit. So with these hugely wild shifting temperatures within a single day, it was very, very important for these people to have clothing that they could layer to protect them against the elements. So wool is a very, very incredible textile for managing body heat and body temperature. In fact, a lot of hikers and mountaineers today will prefer to wear wool over synthetic because it's so good at regulating your body temperature, keeping you at an optimal heat. So the llamas are very, very important. People also could grow coca leaves. We'll talk a little bit about coca leaves during this class. Coca leaves have a natural stimulant in them. People could chew them, and it helped them on these high elevation treks. It worked as an appetite suppressant, and it also helps curb altitude sickness. So if you go to Cusco today, I believe Cusco is about 11,000 feet in elevation. Sometimes that can make you, feel dizzy, feel nauseous, not feel so great. They'll make you coca tea if you go there today. And people up in the highlands could grow potatoes. So potatoes can be grown up to a little over 13,000 feet above sea level. And folks in the highlands also created these incredible terrace systems along these really steep areas so that they could still have agriculture without having flat, vast areas to grow their crops. So we do have agriculture in highland Peru. And then the alpacas and the llamas are very important there as well. So here's a breakdown of some of the different camelids. So they're in the same kind of, I don't know if they're in the same family or if they're in the same genus as camels, but they are related to camels, but they're what we have here in the New World. So when we were looking at Mesoamerican culture, we knew that they did not have beasts of burden, but not so in South America. People domesticated llamas and alpacas from their wild cousins, and these were very helpful for carrying and moving goods throughout the mountainous regions. We do know that people in the Andes were aware of the technology of the wheel. However, wheels aren't super helpful when you're in really mountainous climates or landscapes. So the alpacas and the llamas were very important for those. So alpacas have very soft wool. They were sheared to make textiles. Llamas can also carry burdens over the difficult terrain of mountains. An adult male llama can carry about 100 pounds. So they're not quite big enough to carry an adult human, but they were very helpful for carrying burdens and goods throughout the mountains. But both of those animals would be used for their meat by people in the Andes. And in really high altitudes, they could also use their dry manure as fire starters, because there's no, once you're above tree line, there's not really much fuel for you to use for building fires. The alpacas and llamas can also be pretty headstrong. So they will actually just sit down and not go if they don't feel like going. And so, you know, you had to treat them right. Otherwise they would refuse to move. They can also be a little bit sassy. Llamas will spit on you if they don't like you. And I believe camels also do something similar, but I'm not quite as familiar with camels. All right. This area in this map that's all green, this represents the Amazon rainforest. I know a lot of it is unfortunately being deforested right now, but the Amazon jungle is just this huge, vast system of jungles. It was never formally unified with the coast or highlands peoples, but it was a very important source of luxury imports for people living in the mountains and on the coast. So things that you could get from there would be like exotic animal skins, feathers. This is an example of an Inca poncho where all of these colors you're seeing are little pieces of feathers that have been tied together and introduced into the. So in this class, we'll also investigate the ways in which the environment and the landscape shape the artwork and the worldviews of the people living in those spaces. So in the Andes, where we have these extreme climate changes from region to region, we'll look at some of the interplay between creativity and constraint. So what people are doing with the materials available to them. We'll talk a bit about the limited resources in the different regions. Again, how that really is a catalyst for trade and communication between people groups of different regions. Yeah, we'll look at some of the different ways that the weather patterns, the climate shifts the way that people interpret the cosmos, their worldviews, and their religion as well. So let's talk briefly about chronology. So one thing that we notice with archaeology and history in different parts of the world is that in different regions, archaeologists and historians like to come up with their own ways of discussing time periods. So this is going to be a little bit different than like the classic, the pre-classic, the post-classic, those terms that we use in Mesoamerican art history and archaeology. For Indian art and archaeology and history, typically scholars break things up into different horizons and intermediate periods. Again, none of this is perfect, but in the Andes, we don't have complete writing systems like we have in Mesoamerica. We don't have, or at least we haven't interpreted. We'll talk a bit about quipus and their use as communication devices and recording different types of information. However, as far as we know, we don't have a decoded calendar or written history for peoples of the Andes. So historians break up different approximate time periods, mainly based on radiocarbon dating of organic materials to figure out these different time periods. So we call this time period before the early horizon. We just call it before early horizon. Art historians and archaeologists have discovered that there are older cultures before the early horizon. So like what we discussed with the introduction to Mesoamerican art, this is a really dynamic field, and archaeologists and art historians are constantly finding new sites. And sometimes when you find a new site, you find out that it's older than the previously known oldest site. So Before the early horizon, we have the Chico Norte and the Carl Supe culture. These are around 3,500 to 1,500 BCE. So this kind of overlaps, if you're familiar with art of the Near East, this overlaps with like ancient Egypt, the ancient Ur, ancient Babylon. These are really old cultures that we have evidence of being in the Americas during this time period. The early horizon is estimated to be between about 1000 to 200 BCE. Again, that's before Common Era, with year 0 still being the birth of Christ, but we just use more straightforward terms. So BCE, before the Common Era. We have coastal desert cultures, including Chavin, Paracas, and Nazca. And then we have what's called an intermediate period. We call these intermediate periods where it seems as though there's cohesive cultures, where we see similar styles of art, similar styles of pottery, similar styles of textiles. And then the intermediate period is where we don't find a lot of evidence for like social organization when it comes to at least architecture and craft. Then the middle horizon is between about 600 and 1000 CE, or current era. We have the Andean empires, including the Wari, the Tiwanaku, Lima culture, and the Moche. Then we have a second intermediate period between about 1000 and 1400 CE. Again, this is where we see less evidence of like a cohesion and hegemony. And then the late horizon is from 1400 to 1535 CE. We have Sican, Chimu, and Inca. So these are unifying cultures and empires that are really bringing people together with cohesive direction. And we end this class around the time of the Spanish conquest, the Spanish invasion. However, as a reminder, these cultures and a lot of these belief systems, a lot of these practices are going to still live on past the Spanish invasion. That's just kind of, you can only go so far in an introductory course, so we kind of take that as our breaking point. I hope this makes sense. These early horizons, again, they're pretty approximate estimates, some of these, because we don't have, like in Maya, we have actual calendar years that we can say this happened on a Tuesday in the year 824. We can't quite do that yet with Inca or Andean art. So there is a on page, what page is it on? You do have a little chart on page 7 of your textbook, Art of the Andes by Rebecca R. Stone. So if you want to reference that, on page 7 there is a timeline that has the approximate overlaps of different countries, or not countries, but empires and cultures. And now I'm just going to end this lecture by talking a bit about some of the concepts that are going to be made really clear through Andean art and Andean cosmology. So some of the different ways that we can understand Inca art, and some of the different concepts that we can look for when we are investigating works of art and architecture. So the first one is a huaca. A huaca is a sacred spot or object. It also relates to specialness, duality, emergence, or transfer of energy. So something like a huaca is can be something naturally occurring that's just kind of different from the rest, or atypical. So your book gives the example of a double yolked egg. Also gives the example of an extra limb, an extra finger. I know those gifs are really distracting. Huacas can also be like a cleft in the rock, or a special spot that's considered sacred. But people go to these huacas for spiritual reasons, for a transfer of energy, or, to be close to a spirit. Like, for example, a cleft in a rock could be a place where you could get some sort of transfer of energy or information from the spirit of that rock. We also have kind of man-made huacas. as well. This is Huaca de la Luna. This is a moche site. The bottom is a stone huaca that people have carved niches into in Cuzco in Peru. So again, a huaca can be something that's out of the ordinary and therefore considered to be sacred or special. It can also be a man-made space that's meant to kind of embody or house a transfer of energy. So camay is a verb. It means to create, to manifest, or to infuse with energy, or to embody. And so many of us are familiar with in Western art, this is a close-up of one of Michelangelo's works. It's supposed to be this moment where God kind of zaps the limp, lifeless body of Adam with his life force. So I think we can use, if you're familiar with this image, we can kind of use that idea to understand the transfer of energy from a greater force outside of our realm, giving life or giving energy to animals, plants, the nature, our environment. So I know this is an example from Western art, but you can think of that idea of living beings being transferred with a life force or an energy that comes from outside of our realm. For example, your book talks about how in the Andes, people believed that there was a great lama kamak. So a kamak is the originating force that is larger and outside of our realm. And so they believe that the bigger force of the lama kamak is what transfers energy and gives life and personality to all the llamas on the earth. So you can kind of think of that that way. They also believe that the condor kamak, or the condor life force or spirit out in the realm outside of ours, is what gives shamans or spiritual leaders in their cultures their life force to be shamans. So that understanding is very important. We also have the idea with camay, the idea that being able to like touch somebody's clothes means you get some of their energy on you. So we'll talk about that when it comes to especially like the Inca emperors as well. So just as a note, the originating force is the kamak. So that's that kind of spiritual life-giving energy outside of our realm. And this is really important when understanding Andean art, because for the majority of these cultures, they believed that what we would see as an art piece or a work of art or an object that's been created by people, it was considered to be alive by the people creating it. And art was considered a vehicle for dynamic cosmic flow. So we'll see examples of this with people creating miniatures, dressing them. They were these vehicles for dynamic cosmic flow. Ayni is this concept of two parts making a whole. Ayni is considered like the whole is better than the parts. So we see this duality in Andean cosmology, thought, and of course in their art, where we'll oftentimes see we'll see the coupling of different objects, different persons, different concepts, and together they create a whole that is greater than the two of them. This does not always mean that one aspect is equal to the other. There can be like a imbalance of power between the two parts of Ayni, but we'll see this in art generally when it comes to like the ruler, the Sapa Inca, and the queen, the Koya. Together they create this unit that is more powerful and greater than just a king and just a queen. Together they create this unit that is above them. We'll also see this duality again in art where we see couplings. So we have some examples here. This is a Coptic textile quilted blanket of linen with motifs. This one is Inca. But yeah, we'll see this coupling together to making a whole. We also will talk about this a bit more in the introduction chapter, but contour rivalry is an example of ayni. So objects or works of art, when you flip them upside down, they look like something else. So we'll look next time at the Raimondi stele or stela, and this image looks like a little like the staff god or this person carrying these big staffs wearing this big headdress. But if you flip it upside down, it looks like this crocodile monster, and this headdress becomes its face. So we'll see contour rivalry as an expression or example of ayni, where you have two different aspects, but when you view them a certain way, it looks like one. You view it another way, it looks like another. So that two making a whole is ayni. And you should maybe be writing these down, although they are written out in your textbook. Tinku is the convergence of two to make a third. One thing that we'll see, especially in Inca art, is the idea of channeling water on purpose in different channels, and then the point where the water meets is considered a tinku. The tinku is the two coming together create something that's better. So they create harmony, they create balance. We also see this, like I was talking about when we were looking at the different climatic regions that different peoples lived in. The idea of taking objects that are from the highlands and then pairing it with materials from the coast and bringing them together to create a beautiful art object. That's also an example of tinku. This Chimu stirrup spout bottle is another example of tinku. So we have these two vessels, and they've got this spout that brings the liquids from both of those containers into one, and so we create this harmony, this third option that is better than the first two. It is similar a little bit to ayni, but it's specifically kind of that point where, or that relationship where those two things converge and you have this third that creates harmony as well. This is another example of a double vessel with a stirrup spout, bringing the liquids from two together into one, creating something harmonious and better. We also see this especially at the convergence of rivers. So convergence of rivers were considered to be kind of special and sacred spots. And we will see with water engineering, people doing this on purpose, converging different channels of water together to create a third, better one. Pachakuti is a dramatic upheaval that brings a new order. So pachakuti could be a giant weather system, flood, or storm that completely wrecks buildings, agriculture, livestock, and then people are forced to start anew. So in the Andean worldview, we see a concept of cyclical time. And so, you know, when people ask like, oh, how long ago did that start? You could say, oh, it happened either before or after the last pachakuti. A pachakuti could also be a political upheaval that totally wrecks the political and social order that happened before this. And then the pachakuti brings a new societal order, a societal change, a different political structure or a different political reign. So we even have an example of an Inca ruler who calls himself Pachakuti because he completely wrecked the last social order and brings in a new age. So it can also kind of refer to a new order, a new age. It is this idea of the world turning to a new era. And again, that can be led by natural destruction or political destruction. We also have this story that we see being illustrated in moche art with this event, this myth where all the objects revolt against their owners, and so they kind of upheaval the world and create a new order. Ukhu is the next concept. This refers to the idea that the interior, or what is inside of something or concealed within something, is just as important as the exterior, and that what's on the inside can manifest outwardly. So we see this especially in weaving from the Andes. We'll oftentimes see that the back, so if you guys have ever done like needlepoint or any type of fabric making, embroidery, weaving, sometimes it's really easy for the back where all your strings connect to be super, super messy, and then just one side, the front side, to be really smooth and neat looking. So the idea of ukhu, you would want to make the back side, or the side that's not really shown, to be neat and orderly, just like the front side, because what's on the inside matters. We also see this with the idea of mummy bundles. So the people of the Andes would oftentimes or regularly bury their dead in these bundles that were layer upon layer of really sumptuous handcrafted fabrics, art objects, and so what's on the inside, so they wouldn't just have the outside be decorated, every layer from the inside out would be totally decorated. We also see this concept in the interior mind space of trances as well. So this interior, or what is concealed, is important and manifests outwardly. So we see this concept illustrated here of ukhu. And then finally, a concept or a word that you'll want to know for this section is qumpi. And this is the finest cloth that was available. It was made from the finest, most expensive materials, and it was created in the most labor-intensive manners. So this is, for example, I have an Inca feathered tunic here. So this tunic is not only hand woven, but it is also every single piece of color that you see affixed here is an individual feather harvested from a tropical bird, and woven and attached neatly to create this feather mosaic that is also part of this textile. So qumpi cloth could be really fine alpaca, baby alpaca wool, which is very, very fine and very, very soft. We do have metalworking in the Andes a lot more than what we have up in Mesoamerica. We'll see a lot more gold working and silver working, and people actually made gold thread. So sometimes the most sumptuous cloth is used or is created with actual gold thread in it, along with these very expensive wools and expensive dyes and labor-intensive practices of making the yarns, labor-intensive methods of weaving. So that's like the most expensive luxury good. The opposite of qumpi is huaca. Huaca is just plain everyday cloth. So huaca probably wouldn't be super, super soft. It probably wouldn't be have really expensive dyes. It probably would be a more simple, quick method of weaving. So that is qumpi. And that is the last of these vocabulary words that I want you to know for today. So again, this is a pretty short chapter, but I'm very, very excited to get into the art of the Andes. We'll be seeing a lot of beautiful ceramics, beautiful textiles, gold work, architecture that just totally fits in with the landscape and fits in with these really fascinating worldviews and approaches to life, religion, and creation of objects. So I'm very excited for this. Don't forget to be doing your reading in Art of the Andes from Chavin to Inca by Rebecca R. Stone, and I will see you next time.